I'm going to be tagging MDPI in this video because I don't think they're aware of how publicly I disseminated my hypothesis. Some Brazilian researchers used my hypothesis, now turned theory, in their paper uncited. You're not supposed to be able to say, hey, there is an active hypothesis on the pathology of autism linked to this pathway that does not say where it came from. So I contacted the journal that published it, and I was like, hey guys, that's my hypothesis in that paper. And they responded to me and said, actually, it can't be because the publications that they used were from 1967 to 2021. And I was like, hey guys, that's not accurate because they cite through 2024. And can you maybe tell me where this hypothesis showed up in literature prior to me publishing it? So I guess the author said, oh, they've been discussing the fact that BH4 levels are different in autistics for decades, so it's fine. Like, that is not a hypothesis on the pathology of autism, though. The cause being linked to that specific level. There's a lot of levels that are dysregulated in autism biomarkers. No one linked the BH4 pathway causally to autism and the comorbidities, specifically, especially prior to my work. And I guess the authors told them that it was a conclusion drawn from their results. And so they just emailed me back and be like, oh, we just followed up and I asked someone else and they said it's fine. So it's fine. So I'm starting to word it a little bit more strongly now. I'm like, guys, so it's the journal's position now that this hypothesis on BH4, autism and the comorbidities originated in a 2025 paper rather than my publicly timestamped 2023 publication and dissemination. I have millions of views on this globally. And it was quite controversial. I was called a pseudoscientist for a long time over this. And they're going to tell me, nope, it's in a 2025 paper. They're the ones who did it. What? Everyone who's new here, I came up with a hypothesis, now turned theory, on the pathology of autism and the comorbidities. Essentially, autism is a result of gene mutations that cause a chronic stress response inside the body. And this stress response is prioritized over typical development and typical function in biochemically predictable ways. But this can also be expanded into neurodivergence as a whole, which is why I created neurodivergent biochemistry and created this chart that delineates everything into different phenotypes. There are 5 different categories of stress that your body scans for and maintains. And your genes carry instructions for making proteins, and different flavors of them. Your body is essentially a really complex conveyor belt system, and each protein is a worker at those stations. They perform all the jobs in your body, from breaking down nutrients to making dopamine, all the things. Your body makes a constant kinetic flow of these to keep you alive and functioning. This is regulated epigenetically over time, through our daily cycles, our seasonal cycles, and over time as we develop in age. When there's a breach in one of those 5 categories of stress, it also activates epigenetic changes to which proteins are on and off, because your body now needs to perform those jobs needed to resolve the state of stress back to balance. And the creation of these survival proteins are prioritized over typical development and typical function so that the survival biochemical pathways can be on and active and resolve the source of stress. There's a little guy called BH4 that manages and responds to stress throughout the body. It's essentially the center linchpin. It regulates redox-sensitive proteins, which are the workers that respond to those stress conditions. Because each protein serves a very specific job and role on the conveyor belt system that is our biochemistry, you can track each trait down to a protein, a worker that's either doing his job well or isn't. And there are some proteins that act as a manager in multiple pathways, and that's how you can get traits to cluster. They can also cluster dependent on which type of stress response is activated, because that activates system-wide changes to pathways. And that's how I delineated my autism phenotypes. Side note, this is the part that Princeton took. They broke everything down into traits, clustered them, and linked them down. A peer reviewer even called them out for post-hoc logic, because they were explaining what I did. Each one of those managers links up to a different set of autism traits or comorbid traits. Things like POTS, MCAS, EDS, chronic fatigue. The manager responsible for the autism-specific traits would be the BH4 shunt, because it's needed for all of these pathways, and when it's shunted and diverted up, it goes towards something called glutamate, which controls the speed and intensity messages are sent in the brain. It specifically dysregulates something called the corticostriatothalamic loop. This is in charge of movement, habit formation, and reward, and it's known to be dysregulated in autistics. So the biomarkers, the levels of all of these things that have already been tested in autistics indicates that yes, glutamate is high, yes, the corticostriatothalamic loop is dysregulated, and then everything below the BH4 point is suppressed. That would be things like dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, the endocannabinoid system, and the immune system is dysregulated. So all the biomarkers there, check yes. I've been doing very public breakdowns on my hypothesis, now turned theory, since May of 2023. I even wrote a book about it called Discovering Autism and the Comorbidities Along the BH4 Pathway, published September of 2023. And I self-published papers on ResearchGate. I love that it's open access. I love that anyone can see it. I love that it's not gatekept. I love that I can see the statistics of how many people around the world have opened it and from what institutions they're affiliated with and under what disciplines. I like personally getting that data instead of through a journal, so this is the way I've chosen to do it. Thing is, academia is a very pretentious bunch. And because I chose not to put it in one of their journals, they think it's fair game. It's not how it works. I very publicly made this my hypothesis.